everyone, and welcome to lesson 3 of our statistics unit. So this is the last lesson that we'll be looking at in this particular unit. And today's topic is on percentile ranking. So one of the ways that you can look at how well you've done on a test is to convert your raw score, so your mark, to a percent, which is typically what I do with your test marks, right? But another way that we can look at how well you have done is by calculating your percentile ranking. And a percentile ranking is going to tell you how well you've done in comparison to others that have written the same test. So it's not just your score, it's looking at how you scored on the test compared to everybody else. Okay, so in this section we're going to be looking at how to determine a percentile rank using a formula, and I'm going to be using the new equation that we talked about in class the other day. We'll be looking at the difference between a percent and a percentile rank, the relationship between the median and the percentile, and looking at solving problems involving percentiles. Okay, so the first thing we need to know is what exactly is a percentile. So a percentile is just a number from 1 to 99 that's going to show what percentage of values in a data set are lower, or we often use the word below, a given value. And percentiles are used to organize sets of data like test scores, so you can see how one person compares to another. A percentile rank is going to tell you the percentage of values in a data set that are lower than a given value. And again, it's going to give you a comparison based on how well a person did compared to others that did the same thing. Okay, so if we look at this example here, so we're looking at quiz scores marked on a line plot here. The quiz was out of 10, and the X's represent the number of students who earned each score. One student earned 10 out of 10 on the quiz, and we want to know what percentile ranking the student has obtained. So if we look at the number of students that scored below the person that scored the 10, there are 9 students who scored a lower number, which would mean, so 9 students out of 10 kind of converts to 90% of the students. Okay, so 90% of the students scored lower than this person here, and therefore the percentile ranking for the person who scored 10 out of 10 is the 90th percentile. So I'm going to go through the equation with you that we're going to use in order to calculate this. So this is the new equation that corresponds to the textbook we were using in class. So the equation is P, which represents, so P is your percentile ranking. Where B is the number of scores below a given score. Okay, so that's the B stands for below, and N is the total number of people or things that we're dealing with. So total number is our N, just like when we were working with the mean and the median and the mode. So we're going to use this equation when we're calculating the percentile rank. So we always want to write down the equation, so this is going to be important. And then once we write down the equation, we're going to identify what's B and what's N. Okay? For the first few questions, we're going to be solving for percentile ranking, and then I'll show you how to find for different variables if you wanted to. Okay, so let's look at this example here. So we have a list of 32 marks achieved by a student on an exam, and we want to know the percentile rank for a raw score of 40. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do with this question is write down the equation. So my equation is P, my percentile ranking, equals B the number below over n times 100. Okay, and I'm just going to create a little legend for myself. So I want to figure out first what is b and what is n. Okay, and we're just going to count them up in the question. So b is the number of test marks that score below a 40. So if I just look on the table here, I can just count them up. And luckily, these are in order. So my b, the number that scored below a 40, is equal to 3. N is my total number of marks, and if we read through the question, we can see that there are 32 marks in total. If the question didn't tell us, then I would just go through each of these and count them all up. Okay, so our n is equal to 32. Now that I have those two values, I can go back to my equation and just plop them in. So b over n times 100. Okay, and so that is going to equal 3 over 32 times 100. And we can do this all at once on our calculator, and that works out to 9.375. And usually percentile rankings are rounded up or rounded to the next whole number, so this will equal approximately the 9th percentile. Okay, and that's it for this one. So we figured out the percentile rank for a raw score of 40. So 9 is our answer there. Okay, so same question. This time we're looking for, this should be the percentile rank for a score of 80. Oh, sorry, 80, let's do 83. Okay, so if I wanted to do a raw score of 83, again, I'm going to start by writing down what the question is looking for. So it's looking for the percentile rank. So I'm going to write down the equation. So this is the equation that we're going to use. So b over n times 100. Okay, and then I'm going to identify how many marks are below 83. So here's my 83s. So these are all higher, so we're not going to count those ones. We're just going to count the number below. And if you count up all of these values here, you end up with 23 are below, and n again is 32. Okay, so now that I know those values, I can go back to my equation and plug those numbers in. Okay, so this is 23 over 32 times 100, which works out to 71.8, oops, that's an 8, 0.875, which works out to about the 72nd percentile. Okay, so a percentile rank for a score of 83 is 72. So that means 72% of all of the other students, I'm just going to write that down so you can see it, 72% of all the other students scored below an 83. Okay, and that's what our percentile ranking tells us. So 72% of all the other students scored below an 83. So this student did quite well. Okay, let's look at one more example here. Whoops, and that's the same one, so I'm just going to skip through that one. So this is a different type of question here. So Justin writes a college entrance exam and scores a score of 1,440 out of a possible 1,800. So that was like a ginormous test. Out of the 875 students writing the exam, 25 other students have the same score as Justin, and 680 students have a score below him. Number 1 says find Justin's percentile rank. So as soon as I see that, I'm going to write down what my equation is. So P equals B over N times 100. Then I want to try and identify, well, what's B and what's N? So B in this question, it says here 600, 680 have a score lower, so my B is going to be 680. My N is the total number of students writing the test. So in the question, if I go back to the beginning of the question, it says 875 students write the test. So now that I have those two values, I can plug them into my equation and solve for my percentile rank. So P equals 680 over 875 times 100. So P is going to equal 77.714. So about the 78th percentile. Okay, and that's all I have to do for the first one. So his percentile rank is 78. In order to be considered for a particular program, Justin needs a percentile rank of 75 or better. Is Justin's score high enough to be considered for the program? So he scored a 78th percentile, so yep. So we would say yes to this part of the question. He scored high enough to be considered for the program. Okay, and one last question that I want to share with you is where we don't necessarily know what all of the marks are. So we're missing a test mark in this question. So this is a good example of a question where we have a missing value. Okay, and if you have a missing value from your data set, you're going to do these questions a little bit differently. So if we read through the question, Jennifer has received the following grades on her math test. So 46, 64, 89, 90, and 92. Okay. Her teacher has allowed her to rewrite the first test since she has improved her marks so well. What grade would she need to get on the rewrite? So we're taking this first test and we're getting rid of it, and we want to replace it with something else. And this one we don't know what it is. So what grade would she need to get in order to get an average mark of 85? Okay, so this is a missing value, so she's going to rewrite that first test. So step one, what I'm going to do first is identify what do we know in this question. So if we read through the question, so we have all of these test marks. We also know that she wants to get an average mark of 85. So the average is going to be our mean. Okay, so that's the mark that she wants to get an average of. We also know that the total number of test marks is 5, right? So she's got 5 already, but we're chopping out that first one and going to replace it with something else. So our first step when we're doing a missing value question is to figure out the sum of all of our values. So we're figuring out the E of x. So if you look back to the equation for mean, we said our mean is equal to E of x over n. So we know what this is, the mean, and we know what n is. So we want to find what's the sum of all of our values. So if we find that, then we can find the missing value. So to find our sum, we're going to rewrite that equation, and we're going to multiply our mean times the number of values that we have. And if we do that, then that will tell us what everything has to add up to. So this is step one. Okay, so find the sum. So I'm going to plug in what we know. So our mean is 85, and our n is going to be 5. So when you multiply those through, you should get 425. So that tells us what everything has to add up to. Step 2 is going to be subtract everything that we know. So we're going to subtract all of the known values. Okay, so we're going to take our 425. We're going to minus all of these test marks up here. So we're going to subtract 64, we're going to subtract 89, we're going to subtract 90, and we're going to subtract 92. Okay, and when we do all of that, we should get a missing value of 90. So this means that she must get 90 on that rewrite in order to get an average of 85. So she must get a mark of 90 on the rewrite to get that average of 85. Okay, and so that's how you do a missing value question. So first step, find the sum of all of your values. Second step, subtract everything that you know, and then you end up with, your missing value at the end. Okay, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in class or send me a message on Edmodo. Thanks for watching.